Sehr geehrte Damen und liebe Freundinnen und Freunde der Heinrich-Böll-Stiftung, liebe Kollegen.
Dear friends of the Heinrich-Böll Foundation, dear colleagues, dear guests here and also online, I'm delighted to welcome you here today to the Heinrich-Böll Foundation for the 26th Annual Foreign Policy Conference. And especially, I'm happy to welcome our international guests who have made their way to Berlin or who are joining us digitally. It's no coincidence that we are talking today about security and defense in the hybrid age. It's an expression of a profound shift in our security policy reality. Or, as Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney put it last week in Davos, we are in the midst of a rupture, not a transition. For decades, we took security in Europe for granted, underpinned by reliable partnerships, a shared transatlantic security framework, and economic interdependence. These basic assumptions no longer apply today. We are witnessing how geopolitical power and strategic calculation are being openly used to exploit weaknesses and dependencies, even fundamental principles that we've taken for granted until recently. The commitment to international law, territorial integrity, sovereignty, and alliance loyalty are being called into question. Just think of the recent debates about Greenland. Security is therefore no longer a separate policy area. It's not determined exclusively by borders or military capabilities, but also by supply chains, the protection of critical infrastructure, and people's trust in state institutions and the democratic order. And that's the reason why we are coming together today to view security not in isolation, but in an integrated way, and to bring different perspectives into dialogue with one another. The fundamental upheaval we are currently experiencing is not a singular event. Rather, it's the result of several overlapping developments. Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, which will mark its 4th anniversary in a few weeks, is the most visible expression of this development. And military force is once again being used as a political tool in Europe. But the transatlantic environment has also changed dramatically since January 20th, 2025. With his re-ideologization of foreign and security policy, his recognition of spheres of influence for major powers, his declaration of war on the liberal order, and in particular on Europe and Latin America, and his proposal for an alternative framework that is not based on the equality of all states, but tailored to one person, Donald Trump is breaking with the principles of the post-war order and marking the beginning of a post-Atlantic era. This forces us in Germany and in Europe to ask fundamental questions anew about our security and defense, about the ability of democratic societies to deal with permanent threats in a security policy reality in which the boundaries between war and peace, between internal and external security, between conventional and hybrid threats are becoming increasingly blurred. The sabotage of critical infrastructure, cyber attacks, disinformation campaigns, but also climate-related crises and natural disasters affect our societies not in the abstract, but in very concrete terms in our everyday working lives, in local communities, in companies, administrations, and also in your own home. The key question is thus no longer just how prepared are we for defense after almost 40 years of change, a question that is far too often discussed only in terms of military capabilities, but also how resilient are we as societies to withstand the increasing pressure, overlapping crises and threats? And how can democracy and work on fundamental human issues such as climate protection be protected and continued in these turbulent times? And this is where the leitmotif of our conference comes in. In the hybrid age, Are security and defense perhaps no longer a task that the state guarantees in the background, so to speak, but rather a task for society as a whole that requires our active participation? We deliberately do not want to narrow this debate down to questions of military or civil service obligations for a biological gender or a specific age cohort. Rather, we want to provide a space to think about security in a broader, more democratic and more realistic way as an interplay between state institutions, civil society organizations, economic actors, and informed, empowered citizens. Terms or concepts such as integrated security, resilience, and total defense, in short, the interaction between military and civilian actors and players, are therefore no technocratic buzzwords. They are an attempt to find answers to a reality characterized by complexity, vulnerability, and close interdependencies. The aim is to make the state and society resilient in times of peace and in times of crisis, internally and externally. In recent years, important steps have been taken in Germany to achieve this. For example, with the revision of the framework guidelines for total defense by the Traffic Light Coalition in 2024, or the strengthening of civil and population protection in the reform of the debt brake pushed through by Alliance 90 the Greens in 2025. In its coalition agreement, the Black-Red government promised to prioritize the implementation of comprehensive defense measures over other government tasks. That's what the CDU, CSU, and SPD government said. But one thing is clear: paper alone does not create resilience. What is crucial are functioning structures, practice cooperation, and social trust. That is why this annual conference deliberately looks beyond Germany. Other countries, often based on painful historical experience or a clear security policy compass, began decades ago to view their security as a shared responsibility. For example, our Nordic and Baltic partners, but also countries such as Singapore. Their perspectives are also relevant because they directly border on areas or regions where current security tensions are particularly acute, such as the Arctic or the Baltic Sea region. So the questions we are to tackle today include: what can we learn from the comprehensive defense models of Finland, Lithuania, Sweden, and Singapore? Which models or systems or approaches are transferable, and where are their limits, and how can security and gender equality, generational and social justice, but also the climate crisis, be reconciled, i.e. sought together? We would like to discuss these questions with you today in the knowledge that progressive security policy must have the courage to ask uncomfortable questions about the limits of social resilience, about responsible risk communication, and about consistent political action when red lines are crossed. The Heinrich-Böll Foundation sees itself in this debate not only as a place to facilitate the exchange, but also as a catalyst in a discussion and a debate that is being conducted intensively at the political level, but whose implementation in many areas still lags behind the requirements of the situation. Especially where security policy discussions are often conducted without the involvement of those directly concerned or affected even, we want to create spaces for open, informed, and practical exchange with proven experts from academia, politics, administration, civil society, emergency services, and business, as well as with you, the engaged and dedicated audience, because only when analysis, political responsibility, and practical experience come together can we find sustainable answers to the challenges of our times. So once again, a very warm welcome to today's conference.
To English right now. By the way, there is possibility for translation for everyone. I hope you realize that. Übersetzung ist verfügbar.
There is translation if you want to.
Voices that bring experience, clarity, and political insight. We need individuals who have not only thought about security and defense in theory, but have shaped it in practice under real-world threat conditions. It is therefore a great honor to open this conference with a speaker whose leadership amplifies European responsibility, democratic resilience, and strategic foresight like few others. Dalia Grybauskaitė served as president of Lithuania from 2009 until 2019, at a time when hybrid threats were not a distant concern, but a daily reality. She was the country's first female president and the only president in Lithuania's post-Soviet history to have served 2 consecutive terms. Prior to her president, she was European Commissioner for Financial Programming and Budget and held senior positions in the EU and Lithuanian government, including as finance minister. President Grybauskaitė is known for her outspoken stance on Russia and European security and has been a prominent advocate of deterrence, resilience, and whole-of-society approaches to security and defense. And she reminds us that security policy is ultimately a matter of political conviction. Madam President, it's a privilege to have you here with us today. The floor is yours. Please join me on the floor.
I hope it works. Okay, I hate formal speeches, and I'm very happy that you got introduction. I can go straight to how I understand today's situation in the world, especially after Davos, and then I will be happy to share my experiences with you in dialogue, because what's happening today in reality repeats itself, just faces change, time change, clock change, but personality, responsibility of politicians, of citizens, stays the same. So after Davos, especially after Davos, then we have been beaten to the face from a lot of sides, including from our partners. Reality smell becomes unpleasant and becomes which we cannot avoid. Cannot avoid to make decisions and actions. And we need to drop our dreams that the world can be the same after some events will be gone. The world also changed. And changed in the way that we lost or losing the world based on rules and agreements. Instead of this, we not created anything else. And in between, usually, it's very dangerous time. This we saw before the Second World War, and usually during this time, the authoritarian and dictatorships are starting to fight between each other, and for middle and smaller nations, it's existential threat. That's how I see today's situation, and I name it as we are seeing collision of 3 centuries in the same time. 19th century imperialism, which we see not only from Russia, not only from some Asian countries, but also from our main partner, United States. We still live in illusions of the 20th century world based on order and agreed regulations. And we're facing 21st century with huge, difficult and fast changing technological revolution and instability. And nobody knows what world we will create. And here, what is important for any country, especially for Europe, to be not afraid, take a responsibility. Not waiting anybody else to dictate to us what we need to do or teach us how we need to live, to take responsibility for Europe ourselves. And it's not only about security. Or it is about security in a very wide sense. It is, of course, security directly as military security. It is social security for people. It's economic security, means economic competitiveness and resilience of our economy. It's security of decision-making, streamlining them in unity in European Union, at least. So all these kind of securities are in one basket, and it's our own responsibility. And here we're coming to the leadership. Of course, for geopolitical leadership, it's easier for larger countries with potential of political know-how, knowledge, and financial resources. Why? Most of our countries are looking to Germany, or France, or UK, even not being in Europe, but outside European Union. And we're eager and ready to come together. And this will mean a huge decision-making process with huge responsibility, which finally becomes personal responsibility of any politician, any leader of the country, including Germany or any of us. And this is under pressure from outside, under direct military threats from Russia, under unconventional threats from our partners, including the United States, economical, tariff threats, and even territorial threats. And here, my personal experience says, never give in and push back. It's not only about pushing back enemy. Firstly, it's about pushing back the friend and partner. Because if we give in, we will lose our dignity and we will have only defeat. This will end from Second World War already. The history repeats itself. Especially it is painful than this humiliation we receive from our ex-partner and friend. But my own experience in office says that even confronting the partner, it's more important. Saying if it's doing something wrong, to say no. Otherwise, we will be not respected, and we will not receive better or larger security at all. That's our reality, our responsibility in Europe, and what we're facing today, to go with all geopolitical uncertainties. So that's more or less my introduction. But don't be afraid, it's not because it's so bad. Opposite. I think that we need to name reality, to face it, be able to respond appropriately. Not trying to push everything under the mat. And that encourages me also, because if you know how difficult it is around, it is easier to find the solutions. And it's always, always about personal responsibility of politicians, personal responsibility of the citizens, and how in our country, in Baltic states, we did through all these years after we started to be a members of European Union and NATO. So it always was about personal responsibility of the leaders, personal responsibility of our people. And a lot of examples about resilience of economy was about personal responsibility to cut, for example, Gazprom, ties with Gazprom. For a small country, depending 100% on the pipeline from Russia. After the meeting in 2010 with Putin, I realized that you all give in and kneel in front of him, or you will be crushed. My choice was to risk to be crushed, but never kneel and never give in. And in 2014, Lithuania got a LNG terminal. And we were able to cut dependency on Russian gas 100%. We were able to serve with our LNG terminal all Baltic states, even to Poland, if it was necessary. Because we knew that dependency on energy, it was by Russia used always as a tool of dependency, political influence, economic suppression, and corrupting our political system. It's not about applause, it's about examples. How small country, not rich country, is capable to stand up. Europe, all Europe, rich Europe, can stand up to anybody, and not to be afraid. That's just a small example, an excursion to the history. Okay, so I'm ready to discussion, to the questions, and sharing my experience.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madam President. And I'd like to jump into what you've said. We still live in the illusions, maybe also of the 20th century you mentioned. And my impression is one of the illusions, which is still also alive, is the invisibility of like hybrid threats coming from Russia, for example. And in your experience on that, of course, this is something which has been there quite a long time, but Russia is actually accelerating its hybrid campaigns across Europe. So the question which I have is, what is ultimately like Moscow trying to achieve with this strategy, of course, and more importantly, how can Europe respond more effectively than it has done the recent years on these threats and attacks?
We have our own experience, which could be useful as example also, because after 2014 Crimea occupation, I was alone who said that Russia is behaving as terrorist state. And I was very much criticized by my partners and colleagues in the European Union, and of course by everybody, and even in my country inside. And after that, we saw that Russia started to make informational attacks and propaganda attacks against country, and even the trolls army, so-called trolls army, was attacking our population and opinion. And we went in defense very seriously, but not only government resilience, but also we included all our society, and people, citizens, created the elves army, and they were fighting these trolleys back, without our intervention, without government, but this gave for people the first ownership to beat back, the understanding that they are responsible also for security of their country. And this was unity between politics, leaders, political leaders, and population. And this gave us understanding and resilience of unity, that it's a responsibility of everybody. It's not just for me or for government to do this. So that's on this front. The same is now because intervention into politics, into elections, it was always done not only by information attack, by distorting the narratives, but also by corrupting politicians, political parties. I'm not pointing now into your country, you know yourself what is happening. I'm saying just on my example, the same. Methods are the same. KGB methods are the same. They're not changed by centuries. So, and tools are the same. So, knowing this, we need to respond appropriately. So, and it's about informational resilience, but it's also about economic resilience, about energy diversification, which Europe did only after the direct war in Ukraine, not before. And it's not just about illusions of nice life and friendful so-called life before, but it's probably naivete also partly, and still not realizing real threats from the in our neighborhood in Europe. So, but then I came to office in 2009 after economic crisis. We were paying 30% more for gas than Germany was paying. You know why? Germany was friendful and obedient, we not. And we were beaten by the 30% more expensive gas. Small country, not even at that moment European, before in 2004 only joined, but all this time we were paying more. And that was our price we paid for our dignity, for our independence. And our population was ready to pay it. And that's the price they agreed to pay. So now we have not only Russia's open war, but we have our partner who is for disobedience or criticism is proposing to impose taxes. For example, for Canada now, 100%. But it's very right, you pointed to Canadian Prime Minister's speech. Never give in, because you will receive only humiliation and defeat, nothing else. The same was in Lithuania. Then I started to work. I found that in 2009, after 6 years of membership in NATO, Baltic states and Poland had no defense plans. NATO members, no defense plans. That means the NATO leaders, and including Americans, were so afraid of Russia that they included us in NATO, but not gave at all any kind of possible Article 5, which could work only if it is prepared with planning and all these kind of things. And then I saw it. I was very critical towards administration. At that time was Obama administration. You remember, with the red button of reset relations with Russia. All the administration has this illusion that they can reset. So we protested very publicly, and I was approached that I personally will never enter White House from the main entrance. I said, okay, but I need defense plans. And I stood up against our main partner. And in 2011, I got defense plans. So that's, again, example. Even to the friends, even to the partners, we cannot allow them to humiliate us. What was in Davos? We've been humiliated few times, all day long. And only maybe 2 leaders were able to speak more courageous and saying reality and what we need to do. So it's about to face and smell the reality, nothing else. It's not to fight back in confrontation, but it's to fight back for not to be humiliated. And for that, we have enough resources, enough people, enough financial resources. We need just to take responsibility and not ask and not to complain that how is difficult, how we do not have that or do not have another, and all the time to complain. No, don't complain, do it. Take everything in our own hands and do it. So we did it as much as we were able to, a small country. Now it's time for Germany, for Europe to unite and do what is necessary to do.
And you emphasized that this, of course, requires more than only the decision to present deterrence plans or some kind of autonomy on paper, but you need societal resilience for that. You need the decision and an inner stance of politicians, but also citizens. In your time, in your presidency, you placed strong emphasis on deterrence and simultaneously also strengthening civil preparedness in this regard. Looking at today's security environment and how European states as Germany balance military deterrence with a broader concept of social resilience, how do you see how these countries, which haven't been faced that directly with those threats before, maybe, can overcome this passivity and get to societal preparedness and to the necessity, which you just noted, that there should be a clear stance in the end?
The concept of security changed because security changed. Security environment changed. The defense concept only tried to deter, already gone. We were not able to deter Russia from attacking Ukraine, no matter how courageously we talked. No matter how courageously we're talking now about Article 5. Who believes to it in this audience? If Article 5 depends on one man's mood in the morning or his breakfast, how much you can depend on this Article 5? That means we can depend on ourselves. And for that, we need to strengthen our European core, if NATO, if necessary, to have joint European defense forces. It's our responsibility. Nobody's else. And we don't need to ask anybody's advice for that. We need to take responsibility about our future in our own hands. And that's politicians need to explain to people, to take responsibility and to risk, not to be afraid to lose their ratings, to explain. Then I pushed the government to build a LNG terminal. I was terribly criticized that it will be more expensive for people, that energy will be more expensive, of course, than from Russia to receive or from Belarus, for example, and that I'm corrupted and all bad things. Only after 8 years, I was called as making strategic decision. After 8 years, I was waiting 8 years for that. So, but you go as through the cold water and you do what is necessary to do. That's responsibility of politicians. And if people will see that you're behaving that way, believe me, they will trust you. My ratings all the time was more between 60 and 70% of approval, all 10 years. Because people believed what I do, because I believed what I need to do. It's about responsibility of politicians and leaders. And then people are joining you in support if you explain and if they trust you. So it's about trust, again, between politician, political system, and population, and about your personal responsibility. About personal responsibility. As example, just not to try to be nice and to... we had, then I came, it was 2009, economic crisis. And you remember that at that time, it was also America's government. It was a philosophy that we need to make a lot of budget savings and to reduce any kind of growth in salaries, in pensions, whatever. And for Lithuania also, with government made a decision for 2 years to reduce the social security payments, even pensions and salaries, because we had no monies to pay from. Because our GDP in 2009 dropped -14%. -14%. But we promised to people that after 2 years we will compensate. We will return back everything. But this was not enough. I made public that 50% of president's salary I will personally return to Treasury and never ask back. Never ask back. So why people believe me what I say? And if I said that we need to sacrifice and build a LNG terminal and cut relations with Russia, they said, yes, we believe you, that it is important. So it's about personal responsibility of everybody, from the top to the citizens. If they think that defense and security and prosperity is also their responsibility, we will achieve it together. It cannot be only responsibility of politicians or one leader. So why? After 2014, I started to talk about returning back to conscription. Because we had only contractual defense forces. For small country, contractual forces are terribly expensive, terribly. Plus, contractual forces not increasing and creating the prepared reserve at all. Because under contract, 10, 15 years, they can be in office and you're not preparing anything together. And it was a huge resistance from social democrats, especially for such concept, because at that time, our American friends were saying, you don't need any large army. We will help and we will protect you. We need you only to participate with us in the third places as Afghanistan, other projects, that's it, and contractual army is enough. And for me to persuade that after I saw the Crimean occupation that danger from Russia is increasing, to persuade people to return to conscription was very difficult. But we started it to do slowly. The first on not on obligatory basis, and only now we're increasing, and we have mixed system. And for smaller country or medium country, it is absolutely necessary. For example, Finnish governments all post-war period, never, all the time kept conscription obligatory. Why today they have 200,000 military force and almost 200,000 reserve, active reserve? What is German army today? So, what is UK army today? So we're turning back about responsibility, and it's not only about that it is cheaper to have conscripts as a mixed system. It's not only about that it is important for prepared reserves to be increased rapid and fast, but it's also about to include large portion of population with their families to feel responsible for their own country's defense. That's not less important than money or defense itself. That's the feeling of population that it's their own responsibility to go to military, as it is in Israel. So for smaller countries, it was important. It took a lot of also persuasion and personal risk. You're going out and you do not know how population will react. Maybe they will be unhappy and your ratings will drop. So if you live not from election to election, if you think about country and your responsibility, it's manageable and doable.
Thank you. Alongside with Finland and Sweden, the Baltics have been for a long time front runners on these security approaches. And you talked about the security strategy of Lithuania and your experience back then. When thinking about this experience, which you made back then, and also the country and the Baltic countries in total made since then. What recommendations would you give to the rest of Europe, which now is searching for a comprehensive security strategy, independently also from former or not anymore partners as the US? Are there particular experience where you think Germany and also other European countries really can learn from what you gathered as experience on the way in the Baltics and in Lithuania?
I can acknowledge that in 2009, I was not very eager to increase spending for defense. I was ex-finance minister, you imagine. Usually finance minister says no if money is necessary.
But you've been finance minister before, yes, so you knew yes. How...
Then I was budget commissioner, and I came back to office during the economic crisis, and we were spending only 1%. I want to be clean in front of you. But only the shake after Crimea occupation. After Crimea occupation, we realized that defense already is a priority, and you can have perfect social spendings, perfect social security, but if the enemy will come and damage everything, there will be nobody to whom to pay any social security anymore. And especially this war showed how brutal and damaging Russia still fights. As a few centuries ago, nothing changed in their mentality and understanding of their great Russian imperialism. And here, you need to rapidly change your understanding and responsibilities. And what we did in our regions, Finland was having special treatment and special relations with Russia for a long time, but in parallel, silently, by keeping a large army, a large preparation to defend themselves, especially after the very difficult so-called winter war experience. They never forget it. So today we have open, aggressive war in Europe. And this is absolute fact which we cannot ignore anymore. And with new technologies, there is practically no far borders. Berlin is capable to be reached by a long shot equipment in 5 or 10 minutes. There is no far enemy anymore in Europe. We all are on the border with terrorist state and with criminal state. And in an environment where our partner is trying to push fast its responsibility back to our shoulders. That's our reality. Take it or leave it. And it's our obligation to explain it to our people and to make according efforts to defend ourselves and to prepare.
The question how to explain that and how to communicate that to citizens seems to be quite central in this, as in Europe, of course, the costs of investments into long-term security was long time externalized to the US or to the Baltics, and now it's coming back. And how do you look at that when you would be in the position of communicating here in Germany or in Europe about this and getting these people who are not used to that kind of long-term investments as a constant struggle also? Is there a way of positively communicating that and getting them agreeing to these efforts?
I talked with Ukrainians even before the war and in the very beginning of the war, and I asked, is it possible to prepare? If you know that on your border the Russians are accumulating army, still, is it possible to prepare for the war? They said no. Mentally, psychologically, you're trying to say it's not possible. You're pushing such kind of threat back from yourself. But that's a responsibility of leaders. Knowing this without frightening the people, but to do strategic decisions, what is necessary to do. And the time now is running faster than we're still discussing in Europe. Laughable, still discussing. And discussing again about discussions. But the actions needed, results are needed. And Russia during the war turned its economy in 1 year to the military economy. We still are discussing about European defense, about European funds, about this, another. War changed and changing every month. The substance of the war, the technology of the war is changing. Now, practically, we have not really conventional war, but technological war and drone war. And drones technology changing every month. Every month. You cannot sit and thinking that you have Shahed as 2 years ago and it's fine. Or others from Turkey, which we received in the very beginning. So the war is changing rapid and fast. Now, today, we can learn also about resilience from Ukrainians. And if we're talking about future joint European forces, defense forces, I think Ukrainian forces will be largest part and strongest part and more experienced part of European defense. Because they know how to fight conventional, mixed, and non-conventional war with very limited resources, and only based on people's commitment and capability to sacrifice. We lack this in the West. We're spoiled already, and not many people probably will think that they are ready to sacrifice their lives. While Eastern countries, most of us still having in memory occupation of Soviet occupation and having in memory deportation of our people, still in our generational memory, we take it as existential threat and we're ready to sacrifice. So we need to build on the countries who know and have motivations, who know how to do it, and to join them together and to help them to teach us how to defend all Europe together. So why it is so important to learn from examples, but also to try to prepare ourselves. But as I said, to prepare for the war, practically very difficult and impossible. I'm basing on discussions with Ukrainians, and they were learning to defend themselves already during the war, during the first days and minutes of the war, not beforehand. And then we're talking about 2014 after Crimea occupation, I remember, and the Minsk process, no matter how we evaluate today and criticize, for example, or Chancellor Merkel or others, at that time, Ukraine had no really military force. And if Putin will be willing to go after 2014, he will be able to occupy Ukraine very fast. So the main goal of Minsk process was to engage Putin into the process. And that was the goal of Merkel. That I'm saying because I was asking her why she was meeting so many and so often with Putin. She responded to me that I know who he is, and I'm ready to be humiliated, but I will meet with him as many times as necessary to avoid the war. So we cannot judge what was 10 or 15 years ago by today's circumstances and to judge the leaders' decisions. And I commend her decision at that time. Today, maybe, it will be another evaluation. So why it is important to know the enemy and to sacrifice even your dignity sometimes if you have a strategic goal, but if you see that it is not worth, you need to stand up and to beat back. But to teach anybody on our example or to teach somebody to be ready, it's impossible. That's our own job. Everybody, everyone needs to be ready, mentally, physically, in different ways.
When talking about the responsibility of citizens, the defense of the dignity obviously is something which people can relate to. When we look at Canada, for example, how they are humiliated by this administration and how Mark Carney is also representing his citizens, we can see that there is an understanding of citizens fighting for that. It didn't yet translate to what you expect of responsibility towards defense and security in preparing actually for possible war, at least to prevent it by being prepared. How far can we expect responsibility of citizens to get into that position and take responsibility, and how do we have to look at it also when we look at societal resilience in a broader concept of responsibility for the community, for the state, and many other fields of engagement, for example, for societal security infrastructure, for fighting disinformation, as you mentioned in the beginning. Is there new opportunities also to enhance this basis of responsibility of citizens to prepare and to be ready for security?
It's also about example, and also the first is about leaders. Leaders need to show an example and go first, to be responsible and to behave responsible and to explain, not risking with their ratings, risking with their personal security even, to explain what is necessary, what's necessary to be done. And only by example, then people are coming after you, running behind the flag, as we call it. And dignity is very different from the nationalism, which could turn to aggressive closeness of the society and people and grouping people. With new technologies, especially now, then artificial intelligence could be and is used to use for the false news creation, for dissemination, for making some parts of society more aggressive. It is environment which, as technological progress comes together with the risks, then huge transnational corporations starting to influence globally their reach the peoples, how you formate their opinions. And this is dangerous. Which is, again, it takes a lot of efforts to fight it back and techniques how to fight it back. But that's, again, responsibility of state, responsibility of government. You cannot ask people to be responsible if people seeing corruption or unresponsible behavior or populism. And it's, of course, a pity to say that such elements we do see in some of our partners today, which are not exemplary at all for anybody in Europe.
Madam President, last question on our kickoff with you here
but we
on
didn't
the debate,
ask the audience.
and everyone will be involved throughout the panels, which we will be having right following to this moment here. Mark Carney, in his speech in Davos, was calling for the middle powers to unite somehow and create an alliance. When you look at Europe and the member states in the European Union, is there hope that this call of Mark Carney is answered by the Europeans, and who do you see as the ones who might really now take the initiative on answering to this call?
For Canada, it's understandable. They're a middle-sized country and alone. We are a union. And together, we are a global player, not middle player. It's our potential, and we need to be a global player. For that, we need to have resilient and competitive economy, capacity to defend ourselves, digital sovereignty. How much we all paying from our pockets with the cards, American ones? Everybody. So sovereignty in intelligence, then we will become global player. But we have all this in front of us. Just make it happen. We are not a medium country at all. Altogether, we are entity, global entity.
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry, but he ate all questions of the audience.
I asked some of them, and there will be a small break right now before we start the panel with this voices from Sweden and also Singapore, and get into further debates. I guess you will be around for some minutes, so there might be the opportunity to ask you a question on the way. But we would now have a short break and come back sharply at 14:15 for the panel here in this room. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very
Madam
much.
President.
Thank you.